We are doing lesson 1.2, which is adding integers. Our I can statements for today, here we're looking at the number system. That's what this NS means. And our I can statements are, I know that P plus Q is the same as a distance of the absolute value of Q from P. I can show that a number and its opposite have a sum of 0, and I can explain sums of rational numbers. So before we get into doing learning really the rules for addition with integers, we're going to look at some problems and we're going to use some integer chips to help us reason out some of these problems. So over here I have a positive yellow circle and then I have a negative circle. So what we're going to do is we're going to use these chips to represent putting out different numbers, and then we're going to see what we end up having as our answer. So let's start with our first problem. I think we'll do, maybe we'll do 3. Nope, I don't have a pen. Let's try it again. Okay, that's better. So we will do 3 plus -2. So here's what that looks like with the integer chips. So 3, these are our positives. So I'm going to go ahead and do a positive 3. And then I'm going to put my next number underneath it, so plus -2. So here's how the integer chips work. If I have a positive 1 and a negative 1, together they're going to equal 0. That's a negative pair. So let's see, I'm going to add that over here on the side. So a positive 1 plus a negative 1, that's going to equal 0. When we use integer chips, that's called a 0 pair. So that means we can take it away. So I'm going to cancel out all my 0 pairs. This positive 1 and this negative 1 equal 0 together, so I'm just going to put them off to the side. This positive 1 and this negative 1, those guys also equal 0. So here's what I have left. 3 plus -2, that's going to be a positive 1. So I'm just going to add that as my answer here. 3 plus -2 equals positive 1. When I have more positive values than negatives, I'm going to end up with a positive answer. I have positive things left over. Okay, let's try another one. This time I'm going to put more negatives than positive. So I'm going to do -4 plus +2. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this one. So I'm going to put my numbers on the top here for my first number. It doesn't really matter where they go. Okay, so I have -4 and then +2. I'm just going to pull over here. Okay, so I need to get rid of my 0 pair. So I look to see where I have 1 positive, 1 negative, and then I take it away. 1 positive and 1 negative, I take it away. And then I look to see what I have left over. So for this problem, where I'm doing -4 plus +2, that's going to equal a -2. Negative didn't show up there. Okay, and that's because when I have more negatives than positives, my answer is going to be a negative. Now if you notice on these two problems, I have different signs. I have 1 positive and I have 1 negative. When I subtract those values, I'm going to end up, if it was just 3 and 2, subtract the absolute values, I get the answer of 1. I have more positives, so my answer is going to be a positive. Same thing here. I have different signs, so I'm going to find the difference of the absolute values. 4 minus 2 is 2. More negatives, answer is a negative. So that's if we have different signs. But let's try some problems where we would have the same sign. So let's just do one with positive numbers. 2 plus 1. So I'm going to do it the same way. I'm going to put out my first number, 2. I'm going to put out my second number, which is 1. I'm going to look for zeros. Now here I don't have any zeros to get rid of, so I have to just count what I have. I have nothing to cancel out because they're all the same sign. So 2 plus 1, that's going to equal 3. Now let's say I had two negative numbers that I'm adding. -1 plus, I don't know, -2. And you might notice that when I'm writing a negative number second, like I did here and I did here, I put a parentheses around the negative sign. That helps you see it with a number. Usually when you see a problem in the book and the negative number comes first, there's not a parenthesis around it because it doesn't look like a subtraction sign when it's at the beginning of the problem. Doesn't really matter, it means the same thing. -1 plus -2. All right, so -1 here. All right, and a -2. Okay, and so now I need to look to see, are there zeros I can cancel out? No, there's not. There's only negatives. So how many negatives? 1, 2, 3. So my answer for that part is going to be a -3. All right. So if we take a look at a couple more problems here with the chips before we go on to the rules for adding, write the addition problem model below, then solve each problem. So this first one, now these are white and red instead of yellow and red, but the whites are our positives, reds are the negatives. So for this one, the problem is going to be 4 plus -2. I'm going to just cancel out my zeros by drawing lines through them. My answer, what I have left over here, is going to be +2. I have more positives, my answer is going to be positive. All right, let's look at this one. So for this one, my problem, I'm starting with a -3 in that top row. I'm adding a -2 in the bottom row. I don't have any zeros to cancel out. So I just count up what I have, and that's going to be -5. All right, so when I have all of the same sign here, I'm just finding the sum. I'm adding 3 plus 2 is 5. I only had negatives, so my answer is negative. Different signs, find the difference. Same signs, find the sum. That's our rule for today. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at our next one here. So adding integers with the same sign. So if we add the absolute values of the integers, we use that common sign. So same sign, we're going to find the sum. I'm going to go ahead and write that out here so you can see it. So same sign, whoops, I don't want to write over there. We're going to find the sum. Now if we were in class, we'd be watching this video. It is on the Mrs. Peters website if you want to see it. But since you're already watching this video, we're going to go ahead and just move on to our first example. All right, so find -2 plus -4. Same signs, find the sum. We're going to add -2 plus -4. 2 plus 4 is 6, so -2 plus -4 is -6. All right, so add, we've got same signs, we're going to find the sum. I'm going to pause the video, or you should pause the video and try these next 3. All right, let's go ahead and check our answers. So for our first one here, I have 7 plus 13. That's going to equal +20. Those are positive numbers, so you're adding them same way you've always added positive numbers. Number 2, -8 plus -5. Same signs, find the sum. 8 plus 5 is 13. Since they're both negative, we're going to have -13. And on our last one, -20 plus -15. Same signs, find the sum. That's going to give us a -35. All right, so for this next one, adding integers with different signs. The words here say subtract the lesser absolute value from the greater absolute value, then use the sign of the integer with the greater absolute value. Okay, so that's how the book words it. I say different signs, find the difference, which I've already said a couple times so far, but I'm going to write it down here for you. Okay. All right, so different signs, we're going to find the difference. Same sign, find the sum, different signs, find the difference. And then you do need to pay attention to which you have more of. You have more positives, your answer is positive. More negatives, your answer is negative. So I'm just going to underline this part about the greater absolute value. So 8 plus negative 10, well, 10 minus 8 would be 2. It's a negative 2 because we have more negatives than positive. Negative 13 plus positive 17. 17 minus 13 is 4. More positives, answer is positive. And then here down at the bottom, here is a property. We're going to be talking about lots of different properties in this chapter. Additive inverse property is when a sum of its integer and its opposite, or its additive inverse, equals 0. So negative 6 plus positive 6 equals 0. Negative 25 plus 25 equals 0. A plus negative A equals 0. And later on in this chapter, we're going to look at where those additive inverses can really save us a lot of work. All right, so let's try some of these. Find 5 plus negative 10. So different signs, find the difference. If I thought 10 minus 5, that's going to be 5. More negatives, answer's negative. I have 10 negatives, I have 5 positives. Let's look at this next one. Negative 3 plus positive 7. Different signs, find the difference. 7 minus 3 is 4. And there are more positives, so my answer is going to be positive. And then for C, negative 12 plus 12, those are additive inverses. So they're going to equal 0, which isn't really positive or negative. All right, let's take a look at our next problem here, which is a story problem. It says the list shows 4 bank account transactions in July. Find the change in the account balance. All right, so we're looking at the total amount of money that you have in the bank account, how it's changed since the beginning of July. So I'm going to start by just writing out my problem, and then we'll talk through some different strategies for solving it. So I have a negative 40 plus 50 plus 75 plus a negative 50. Okay, now I can add these from left to right if I want to, or I can group things together. When I have multiple numbers like this, I always like to look for additive inverses, because if I find them, then they equal 0, and I have fewer numbers to add. So that's what I'm going to do in this problem. I'm going to use the commutative property here that lets me change the order of an addition problem, and it doesn't change the value. So I'm going to rewrite it here so that my 50 and my negative 50 are next to each other. That's a commutative property. And then I'd like to add those first. So I'm actually going to put some brackets around them. That's the associative property that lets me group within addition without changing the answer. All right, now I'm ready to add. 50 plus negative 50, that part's 0. So I basically can ignore it and then just do this part of the problem. Negative 40 plus positive 75. Since I have 2-digit numbers, I'm going to rewrite that problem. Since it's like subtraction, I'm going to write it vertically. 75 plus negative 40. Different signs, I'm going to find the difference. 5 minus 0, that's 5. 7 minus 4, that's 3. And then I need to look to see which I have more of. So I had 75 positives. I had 40 negatives. So I'm going to have a positive number. Story problems always need a label. So on this one, my change is going to be $35. And that's going to be a positive $35. Now, did I need to add them in the order that I did? No, I could have done my negative. Sometimes people like to group it by sign and get negative 90 and add to a positive 125. It would give you the same answer at the end. So you certainly can do it that way. Just need to make sure you're writing down the work for what you are doing. One last comment before we move on to the ones that you're going to try on your own. Notice when I wrote this vertically, I wrote the one with a greater absolute value on the top. So you do want to make sure you're doing that when you're doing the 2 double-digit problems, particularly when you have to use subtraction with different signs. All right, let's take a look at our next problems here. Go ahead and pause the video and try these on your own. Okay, let's check our answers. Different signs, find the difference. -2 plus 11. 11 minus 2 is 9. More positives, answer's positive. Positive 9. Number 5, 9 plus -10. Different signs, find the difference. -1 is going to be our answer on this one. I have more negatives than I have positives. And then 6, -31 plus +31. Again, those are additive inverses. Additive inverses are always going to equal 0. And then here, if in example 3, the deposit amounts are 30 and 40, find the change in the account balance. So originally I had a -40 and I had a -50. And my deposits now, my positive numbers are changing to be 30 and 40. Okay, so I see that my -40, my +40 are additive inverses. So I'm going to put those next to each other, 40 plus -40. I'm going to go ahead and group them so you can see those two together. And then I'm going to rewrite the rest of my numbers. So -50 plus +30. All right, -40 plus 40, that's 0. -50 plus 30, different signs, find the difference. 50 minus 30 is 20. More negatives, answer is negative. Story problems need a label. That one's label is going to be dollars. -$20 is the change in the bank account. All right, and our last one here. What do you know about the sum of A plus B? Explain your reasoning. So here, B has a greater absolute value. So I know that A plus B, I don't like where that is. Let's try that again. Okay. All right, so what do I know? A plus B. A plus B is going to be a positive number. And that's because the absolute value of B is greater than the absolute value of A. And I can see that by the distance here. The distance is bigger here, so that's going to be more positives than negatives. Our answer is going to be positive. And then our last one here, two integers have different signs. Their sum is -8. What are possible values for the two integers? So I need two numbers that add to -8. So let's see. If I had a -2 and it says different sign, so I need a positive one. -2 plus +10. 10 minus 2 is 8. And then I have, wait a minute. I had more positives. My answer is going to be positive. So I need to change this. I'm going to erase my signs. I'm going to make that a +2 and a -10 because I need more negatives if my sum is going to be negative. So I'm going to make that a -10. I'm going to make that a +2. And that's going to give me an answer of -8.